In this video, we're gonna be talking about the cEDH metagame of 2023. I try to do this kind of video once each year, at the start of every year, just to give an update to things, but also a form of introduction to the format. Of course, things could change throughout the year, but this is where we're at the current point. I should say that not that much have changed since 2022. However, there are a few more things to talk about. So to kick things off, I guess to no one's surprise, Grixis is still the mean machine of the game, as this is primarily what you need to be doing or need to stop, or as well be scared of, regardless. So fastest consult is absolutely the fastest way to win currently, still haven't changed. But also just using rituals to get your ad nauseam to resolve as fast as humanly possible is also a big thing. Or just build up a huge graveyard and win with Undual Breach, Lion's Eye Diamond and Brain Freeze. And most commander decks are oriented around trying to achieve this with variations from the commander, as different commanders give you different options. Rhystic is a good example of this, achieving Grixis Color Identity and Rograk for 0 mana, and that means that you can use Culling the Weak to immediately get 4 mana from that huge ritual to get that ad nauseam to resolve faster, but also making that Mox Amber into a turn 1 Mox Ruby. Tymna Crom is another tweak to this, gaining white to the color identity, but also great card draw from the command zone. So this is more of a mid-range take to the speed thing, and you can build this with lots of variations, by the way. This commander pair is often called the blue farm if you're going for that odd nos fast as breach style, and as it has become a very popular deck, there are lots of different builds out there on the internet for this, and honestly you can make lots of different variations to this. For example, I have seen Teferi Master of Time, I actually have, inside that commander pair, still being on the odd nos strategy. I don't know if that's what you want to do, but I've seen people do that. Another tweak is Armix and Crom. And now we should talk about why Armix. It's actually kinda simple. You can namely summarize the current metagame to be said like Ad Nauseam Storm versus Rule of Law Stax. And Armix is just a counter answer to that, a commander in the command zone that can deal with hate bears, basically just attack, discard things to the grave, and remove that Archon from the game. So it's still turbo with an anti-Stax theme to it. But if we keep going further down the road, we even have things like Nayella the Blade Blossom, a commander that can win with infinite combo steps, still being on that Grixis style, as you have access to all 5 colors here, to really showcase that wherever you go you have Ad Nos and Fastest Oracle to worry about, regardless of the commander, unless it's one of those Stax decks instead, where Nayella have basically usually picked up Grim Hireling for a infinite combo potential, but also a way to remove hate bears, as well as being something that can help you ritual out Ad Nauseam for you. But once again, Nayella can be built in a lot of different variations of ways as well. Nayella being a really good example here, you could still go for the infinite combat steps with Nayella with Grim Hireling and her other effects, but still also play a stack package to deal with Ad Nauseam strategies across the table. Because if Ad Nauseam is the thing that is everyone is playing, it's easier to find your answers to them. Rule of Law basically solves the deal because everyone is on Ad Nauseam, more or less. Alright, not entirely all true, there are still some very grindy mid-range decks out there as well, but you're usually gonna end up with a Ad Nauseam player or a Undual Breach Fastest Oracle player, I should also add in there, in your pod in most of your games. But currently as a Stax deck, you could accidentally end up in really strange pods. For example here, let's say everyone is playing this and Francis has a Bruce or a Tymna or a Veil Smasher. You don't really exactly know here what the Francis is gonna do or what the Kenrith is gonna do, but CC could also be a bit different. But CC is usually a Stax deck, and Venota is close to every time a Stax oriented deck. Here your Rule of Laws could be mediocre. Sometimes good, but sometimes not that great. So a take I could say from my personal side is that it feels like you shouldn't overcommit on Rule of Law. They're not gonna save you in every single game. They're gonna be great, but you wanna have the right ones. For example, I don't think Rule of Law is good at all. These are the 2 Rule of Law effects that I would recommend playing, and more than that might be an overcommitment. as there are other cards that are quite universal, will deal with a lot of different things, but also deal with the ad nauseam stuff. For example, a great card right now in the current metagame might be Rhystic Study actually. So Rhystic Study is awesome if you're playing against someone who's trying to win with an ad nauseam. Sure, they can draw a bunch of cards, they can sit there and cast their fast mana rocks and their rituals, and you will draw a card each single time they cast a spell, which means you're gonna draw into your interaction to deal with ad nauseam storm attempt ultimately, but also draw into your win con yourself. But also if you end up in a really grindy game where a Phrasius is sitting there and just trying to draw cards forever, then your Rhystic Study will help you out here as well. Because in long games, Rhystic Study is amazing. So a big recommendation for the 2023 cEDH metagame, I would say try to turn 2 or turn 1 Rhystic Study. Just mulligan until you have that Rhystic Study. Build your entire deck capable of getting that turn 1, turn 2 Rhystic Study really consistently. Play both Simian Spirit Guide and Elvish Spirit Guide just for that super fast mana, Ancient Tomb, City of Traitors, Gemstone Caverns, Mana Morpheus. Just make sure that whenever you take a mulligan, your chance of getting a turn 1 Rhystic Study or a turn 2 Rhystic Study is really good. View it like Rhystic Study is your actual commander. If they ever print a 5-color Rhystic Study, that commander would be tier 1 instantly. The Rhystic Study game plan could be absolutely amazing in a very broad spectrum across the entire format currently, as the big thing currently, or as always in EDH multiplayer, is that the first player to try to win is the first player to lose trying to win. It's very common that someone is trying to often win quite fast with an ad nauseam, and then someone has a force of will because they respected that thing greatly. Good job. However, that means that the next person to try to go for his ad nauseam chance of winning increases, as force of will have now decreased from people's hand size. Our Rhystic Study just sitting there drawing cards through this counter war, chance of winning just goes through the roof here. And also Rhystic Study isn't really presenting a win at the current situation, so you don't have to deal with it. Also, there are situations where you shouldn't deal with the Rhystic Study because someone is just gonna cast their ad nauseam and win instead, and having that Rhystic Study in play makes sure that that ad nauseam player doesn't do that, and you don't have to sacrifice your force of will to any of this. And sometimes when you just counterspell a Rhystic Study, you just lose the game because then someone wins with their ad nauseam as you've spent your counterspell. What I wanna try to showcase here is that there are different ways to tackle the format. You might sit and say that you hate the Grixis color, the Grixis combo dominating the format, but there are different ways to tackle that problem. You could tackle it with Stax creatures like Archon of Emeria and other variants to that, or a similar style yourself with Rhystic Study, or a different style yourself with Rhystic Study. But when you enter the cEDH metagame, this is what you have to have in mind, and I don't think that's gonna change throughout the entire year. People are gonna try to fast ad nauseam, people are gonna cast Dockside Extortionist and get a lot of treasures when people put a lot of rocks into play and enchantments, and they're gonna try to win fast with Fastest Oracle. And the question is, where do you fit in all of this? Something I have often said on this channel is don't focus on the commander, focus on the game plan and choose the commander afterwards. I think Armix and Crom is a really great example of that. You're focused on a turbo combo game plan, but then considering what people are doing, you're adding Armix as the other pairing to be able to deal with the current metagame. The commanders aren't really important here for the core game plan. The core game plan is still Fastest, ad nauseam, Underworld Breach, Dockside and stuff like that, but to deal with what other people are doing. Phrasius, Bruce, Kenrith are great examples too. We don't really know exactly what they're doing. Their 99s could be great, but the commanders are just there to utilize what the game plan for the deck is. To give you a more broader example, I've actually built a Niv Mizzet Reborn deck recently that I actually like. The commander used to be Kenrith, but I never really casted Kenrith. The deck just played its game plan perfectly the way it should, and I never really wanted to cast the commander at all. So Niv Mizzet Reborn was a pretty good commander for that specific game plan that deck had. as when I would cast this, I would normally get somewhere around 1 to 3 cards to my hand for 5 mana, which is bad. However, I never really wanted to cast it anyway. It was just there to do that big burst of card draw, and then I would transition back to my normal game plan for that deck. I actually think this is good news, because it means that a lot of different strange commanders that you think are cool could work. For example, I actually think Giganta as the commander might be a little bit interesting. To just feed your imagination and creativity, you could do things like Graven Cairns and Sunken Ruins to convert Giganta's strange mana that you can only spend on colors to real mana. You could even focus it down to a lot of black mana here for your Ad Nauseam and other cool color identity multicolor strategies. But you could still do that Rhystic Study commander with this as the potential commander. Remember, if your core game plan is to get your Rhystic Study into play and then just sit and dirtle, it doesn't really matter what commander you have. You could pick Giganta or any other commander that you think are cool with a lot of color identities that will do something very strange outside your game plan when nothing is going according to plan. But there's another thing to mention here as well. When you show up with Giganta as the commander, people are gonna be, that's a casual player. He doesn't know what he's doing. Let's ignore that person. And you're gonna be a little bit left alone. Strangely, that shouldn't happen, but it happens. Commanders have won games not because they're good, but because they surprise people. If someone shows up playing this as their commander choice, everyone knows exactly what they're up to. You can't hide it, can't lie about it. With this you could say, I'm gonna tap this for mana and cast big spells, and everyone thinks you're a casual player. But then you suddenly storm off with a cool storm strategy here. And we could carry on with different examples here. Giganta is just an example. There are lots of different commanders I could showcase here instead of Giganta. But the big important message that you need to get from this video is that you need to be prepared for this. cEDH is a fast format. And by the way, there are other combos as well that are very popular. Hermit Druid is still a thing, Dockside Emil still a thing, and you could accidentally feed the Dockside, so be wary about how many artifacts you put into play. Random whatever mana rocks aren't always great to have in multiple options on the board state, because you could accidentally give someone 9 mana with this 2 mana cost Goblin Pirate. That's scary. Birthing Pod, still a thing. But once again, this is the big thing. But I would like to end the video with Rhystic Study is gonna be the new big thing. Once people figured out that I'm right. I think I'm gonna tweak a lot of my decks, and you're gonna see that a lot of decks that I'm gonna be playing are gonna be focused on Rhystic Study as the commander. And then I could do whatever I want afterwards. I guess I should throw in Mystic Remora and Smothering Tide here as well. Just feed me, guys, and I will do crazy things. People are gonna give me card draw, people are gonna give me treasures, and I'm gonna win with an enormous hand size and enormous amount of mana. As a player who's been playing heavily Archon of Emeria and heavily Stax, I'm gonna tweak more towards this kind of control instead. Because one thing that is very, very common in the cEDH metagame currently, people are greedy. No one wanna sit and pay for this, and no one wanna sit there and do nothing. People cast their spells and give away card draw. So if you don't like the Grixis game plan, then go and do this. I hope this video have been somewhat inspirational and some informative as well. Thank you so much for watching. And let's change the greed. Let's showcase the true power of Rhystic Study. That's my personal take on the cEDH metagame currently at the very least. Yours could differ. Would love to hear your opinion on that if you have any other cool strategies regarding the metagame as it currently is. But take care, guys. I'll see you in the next video.